All right, I'm here with Stephen Donziger. Thank you for making the time to do this, man. I know it's a very hectic period in your life at the moment.
Yeah,
Um,
well, thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
yeah. So I will have recorded an intro, separately, so we don't need to. Everyone knows who you are and what's going on, more or less. I'm really interested. You know what? When I think about situations like what's happening in Ecuador or the Niger Delta, or people who are facing legal jeopardy, and they're alone. They don't know how. They don't have resources. They don't know how the legal system works. And then someone like you comes along, some guy who went to Harvard, who could be making, seven-figure salary defending oil companies, who not only sacrifices that kind of income, that kind of, cushy life, but also puts himself on the line the way you have. What the hell motivates you? Where does that come from?
Well, wow. That's a pretty good opening question. I give you credit.
We'll talk about this for 40 minutes, all right?
Not I think about that much. I'm sort of like living day to day trying to help people in Ecuador and get out of my own situation. But, I've worked on this for 25 plus years, but I've worked on a lot of other cases. I'm a professional lawyer. I'm not just a crusader for this environmental justice case, even though I work hard on this case. And I'm super proud of the work I and other lawyers on this case have done for the indigenous peoples of Ecuador. I mean, we've won a massive, significant, historic judgment against Chevron. When you choose a line of work in any career, you often never know how it's going to play out, right? When I got into this case in the early 90s, of course, I thought it was a simple pollution case. The facts were evident. Chevron even admitted that its predecessor company, Texaco, had dumped billions of gallons of toxic waste in Ecuador. It wasn't very complicated. And what's happened over 25 years is Chevron has invested literally billions of dollars, used at least 60 law firms, 2,000 lawyers, to try to make it more complicated than it is, and to confuse people about the fundamental fact, which is that they went into Ecuador, where 5 indigenous groups lived, and played God and made a decision that rather than do it correctly, they were just going to dump the waste into the waterways that the indigenous peoples relied on for their drinking water, their bathing, and their fishing. And they produced a cancer epidemic that literally has killed thousands of people over the last 50 years. And they haven't paid $1 in compensation, although they did plant some trees in Ecuador's capital of Quito as a social service kind of gesture. So when you're a lawyer and you choose to take on something like this, I just take my duties really seriously. My clients need representation. Chevron's victims need help. I've spent a lot of my time organizing other lawyers to come into the case. There's been, dozens of lawyers who've come in and out of this case over the years. It's not my case. It's the people of Ecuador's case. They won. It's their judgment. But I worked hard on it, and I take my obligations seriously. And, money was never something that motivated me to go into the legal profession. What motivated me to go into the legal profession was to use whatever talents I could develop to help people who otherwise would not get access to the talents that someone like me has coming out of Harvard. And I'm so proud. I mean, one of the things I'm really proud of is we've organized millions and millions of dollars of legal services for the people of Ecuador from U.S. lawyers and lawyers in Canada and other countries that they never would have had access to and that they haven't had to pay for because other lawyers also care. And they're willing to work pro bono on cases like this when there's a compelling enough need. So I'm really proud of that part of our legal profession that cares. And there's a lot of lawyers, myself among them, that really care, and I think have done outstanding work on this case to produce this historic court victory. The issue of where I'm at is so bizarre and crazy, and we'll get into that. it's not really indicative of what normally happens in these types of cases. And, but I'm just really proud of what our legal team has accomplished. I'm super proud of the leadership, the community leadership in Ecuador. Without that, this never would have happened. So many individuals, so courageous, so sophisticated. It's been an amazing experience.
Why is Chevron going after you personally when so many lawyers have been involved in this case, as you say?
Because I've been instrumental every step of the way in pushing it forward more than any other lawyer. And there's a lot of lawyers who've done great work, but I think they've accurately perceived me to be the driving force. I've raised 99% of the funds from donors and investors. I've organized the legal teams. I speak a lot to the media. I try to amplify the voices of the people in Ecuador who are hurting so they can get access to people like you, up here. And I think they're attacking me really for two reasons. One is I think they have incorrectly calculated in their own heads that if they can lock me up and get rid of me, the case will go away. It will not. There's too many other lawyers working on it. And two is I just think they're flat out bothered by the fact I call them out. They're trying to get me to not do interviews like this, and they're trying to shut me up. And, this isn't about me. I mean, they're personalizing it about me. It really is about their effort to use me as some sort of symbol to intimidate all the other lawyers and environmental activists and journalists into just ignoring this environmental atrocity that they've created that is killing people as we speak. They don't want people to know about this. And, I'll take almost any interview request I get. I just did an interview the other day with the Columbia Student newspaper. I'm telling the truth about what they did. And they want me to be quiet, and therefore they attack me, hoping I'll just stop and give up.
And it goes even beyond the damage to the human populations in that area. It's one of the most diverse ecosystems in the world, is my understanding. And they're destroying entire ecosystems, not just the humans, the birds, the fish, the amphibians, the trees, the whole thing. It's not like it's out in the middle of the desert somewhere where, who gives a shit? This is one of the richest environments on the planet that they're despoiling.
Very true. And that's an important point. It's not just the people. People live in an ecosystem. This is the most biodiverse area on the planet. I mean, you can have 1 hectare and have 1,000 different species of plants, animals, birds, and trees, literally.
Yeah.
And to go into this area in particular, as opposed to, say, the Gulf of Mexico or Death Valley in California, to go into this ecosystem and drill in this way, where they deliberately dump their waste. I mean, Chris, I can't emphasize this enough. This was not an accident. This was part of an engineering design by Chevron to dump billions of gallons of toxic waste into indigenous ancestral lands. It produced a mass industrial poisoning systematically and deliberately so they could save money on their production costs. And the people who live there many have paid the ultimate price, and everyone has paid some price. So they basically, privatize the profits. They take the oil out, dump the waste, sell the oil, make money, leave the most vulnerable communities on the planet with the bill to clean up their mess. It's disgusting. And I want to just mention this fact in particular. When Texaco went in there in the 60s and 70s and started polluting, and the indigenous leaders were like, what's up? What's this black stuff in our waterways? And and the Texaco engineers were told to say, oh no, it's the oil is like milk. It has vitamins. That's what they were told. I mean, the level of abuse, it's just the charts, and I've never seen anything like it. And that's why, getting back to your first question, why I've stayed in this long, I just can't turn my back on it.
Yeah. When you won the judgment in Ecuador, that must have been a fantastic moment for you and your other people that you were working with. Did you expect it to end there? Did you think they would pay up and clean up and get out?
Yeah, I did. I had faith that they would comply with the rule of law and at least settle the case at that point. I mean, at that point, the year we won, which was 2011, we had been litigating already 18 years.
Yeah.
I did not anticipate their being able to manipulate the U.S. judicial system to avoid paying. I mean, I will say this. They've spent $2-3 billion to attack me and to put off the day of reckoning to the people of Ecuador. If they had spent that money to clean up, they could have done that many years ago. Thousands of lives would have been saved. They wouldn't have had to deal with me and all the reputational damage they've had to suffer. I mean, there's literally a shareholder revolt within Chevron against management over their mishandling of this case. And the world would have been a much happier, safer place. Why couldn't they do that? And what I've learned that I didn't really know before is the fossil fuel industry generally, Chevron in particular, is vicious. I mean, they will stop at nothing to protect their polluting business model that is, in my view, destroying our planet, to kind of wrest out every last dollar of profit they can in an industry that's in major structural decline because of global warming. And I think the idea that like this lawyer, and I work out of my apartment in Manhattan, I've been to Ecuador 200 plus times, I travel a lot, but I work here just because I'm near my son, and I since I travel so much when I'm in New York, I want to be home, and I work a lot and I want to be around. So I work out of this, humble apartment in Manhattan, fighting 2,000 lawyers. Now, I work with other lawyers, a few other lawyers around the world. We collaborate, but I'm alone. And I'm still working at my kitchen table. I mean, even while under house arrest, I'm still working at my kitchen table. And I enjoy my work. And we're being really effective. I mean, this case is really strong, viable, and they're facing major risk. Believe me, they would not be locking me up with their own private corporate prosecutor if they felt no risk. They feel enormous risk, as they should, because the people of Ecuador own a $10 billion judgment against them for what they did. And, what they're fighting is not only that judgment, or they don't want to pay it. They're fighting the idea that people, like the people of Ecuador who won the judgment, they're fighting the idea that they can bring cases. I mean, they don't want these cases, whether it's Nigeria, Ecuador, Peru. I mean, there's so many countries where they have environmental problems, the United States. So they're attacking the people of Ecuador over spending massive sums of money. I mean, they could have spent less and cleaned up. But it's because they're trying to send a message to people around the world not to bring these cases. That's what they hope to accomplish from this massive counterattack and, I would say, overkill retaliation campaign.
Are they still extracting oil in Ecuador?
No, they
so
left.
What,
no.
Yeah,
so there is oil being extracted in Ecuador from various companies, but not Chevron.
Not Chevron. So what's to stop them from just saying, we've got no assets in Ecuador? I know one of the things that's unusual about your case is that, the sort of general sense is that the legal systems in Latin America are corrupt, and judges are easily bought off, and politicians are bought off. And so these corporations can operate with impunity because they own the entire system. But the United States is different from that. The United States has a legal system that has integrity and is not totally owned by these corporate interests. But in this case, everything seems to operate in the opposite way. You actually got an objective judgment in Ecuador, and then when you try to apply that judgment to the company in the United States, suddenly things start looking very corrupt. Were you surprised by that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm a rule of law guy. When you're a law student in the United States, you're taught that we have, if not the world's best legal system, one of the top 2 or 3 with Canada, England, to experienced the Ecuadorian legal system, which performed, in my view, admirably against every effort by Chevron's lawyers to sabotage the case. I mean, that trial took 8 years for a reason. They kept trying to grind it down, intimidate judges, file duplicative motions to slow down the process. Their whole strategy was to sabotage that trial so it would never end. And we fought every step of the way. By the way, not me, Ecuadorian lawyers fought every step of the way and kicked butt to win that judgment, which was based, by the way, on voluminous scientific evidence, undisputed scientific evidence, including 64,000 chemical sampling results that showed that they had massive pollution that had been left by Chevron in Ecuador. So that was a really good result. They couldn't handle that. They had no argument. So they had to manufacture evidence and I think commit, yes, corrupt acts. And the way they did that is they paid an Ecuadorian witness $2 million, Alberto Guerra. The Chevron lawyers at the U.S. law firm of Gibson Dunn coached him for 53 straight days so he could get his story straight. And he claimed without any evidence that he had been in a meeting with me in Ecuador where I had offered or approved of a bribe to the trial judge in Ecuador. Now, why would I do that? We were winning the case. The evidence was overwhelming. It was just crazy. And they made it up. And then Judge Kaplan, who they steered the case to, who's a former tobacco lawyer, he's a federal judge in New York, and I don't believe he is a man of honesty and integrity, frankly. And I hate saying that because I want to believe all our federal judges are. But my experience with Judge Kaplan is he falls well short of the minimal standard. And he denied me a jury, let this lying witness come in and say this after being prepped for 53 days to lie. He believed him and not me. I've never had a single complaint from a client in 30 years of law practice. I'm a man of integrity. He believed him, an admitted liar from Ecuador, paid $2 million by Chevron over me. But it wasn't, the game wasn't, this wasn't a truth-seeking process. It was a weaponized political process by Chevron and Judge Kaplan to destroy the model of this case, to blow it up so no one would do it again. And also, obviously, to protect a major U.S. company at the same time. I mean, it infuriated them that the Ecuadorian courts had the audacity to impose a judgment on an American company. So take a step back. What happened? Kaplan is a trial judge. He's the lowest level federal judge. There's appellate courts and then the Supreme Court above him. He purports from his Manhattan trial court without looking at any of the evidence in the Ecuador case. He excluded all the environmental evidence. Without a jury, without speaking Spanish, without understanding Ecuadorian law, probably without ever having traveled even to Ecuador, he purports to rule that a judgment from another country that had spent years looking at the evidence was somehow fraudulent based on a paid Chevron witness. And he tried to, by ruling this way, he tried to overrule Ecuador's Supreme Court, which had affirmed the judgment from his Manhattan trial. But I'm going to say this about colonial systems of thinking. I mean, can you imagine if the opposite occurred? Can you imagine if an Ecuadorian trial judge had, from his trial court, tried to overrule a decision of the United States Supreme Court? How he'd be laughed at? But Judge Kaplan, a U.S. judge, did that to Ecuador Supreme Court. And a lot of lawyers oh, I guess the case is a fraud. I mean, they give Judge Kaplan, some lawyers do, more credibility, even though he got it completely wrong. And I think he's not on the up and up, compared to the collective credibility of 29 appellate judges in Ecuador and Canada who have affirmed the judgment. I mean, there's stories you read in the U.S. legal press, the only thing that matters is what Judge Kaplan says. They don't even talk about what Ecuador's courts and Canada's courts say. And it's a real problem.
How hypothetically, because, last thing I want to do is make your situation, the legal jeopardy more intense. But hypothetically, how would Chevron apply pressure to a judge in the United States? I mean, how would that work?
The way it works is there's been multi-decade effort to remake our federal judiciary so it's pro-corporate and more right-wing. And that's done through various organizations like the Federalist Society, the Judicial Crisis Network. A lot of people know more about this than me, but there's a whole infrastructure out there in America to control the judiciary so corporate interests are served over the interests of the people. And so a lot of times you go to federal court, I mean, and you're a corporation, it's just stacked in your favor from the get-go. And you can get almost any judge on some courts and they're going to be sympathetic to you. You know, in this particular case, Judge Kaplan definitely comes out of that world. You know, he represented Philip Morris, Brown and Williamson when he was at the big corporate firm Paul Weiss for 24 years before he was named to the bench by President Clinton. You know, he's one of the most Clinton, yeah. He's one of the most pro-corporate judges imaginable. But in New York, you know, Donald Trump has now appointed 25% of the federal appellate judges just in the last 4 years. I mean, the court has moved decidedly to the right. So it's very difficult when you come in with an environmental case or a human rights case or a civil rights case to get a panel that comes out of that world. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And you're always fighting uphill in U.S. courts. I mean, people need to understand, particularly people who care about environmental justice, look at the courts. You know, yeah, there's the Sunrise Movement. There's all sorts of things happening at the citizen level. And then all these problems get stalled in courts. You know, for example, all these lawsuits against the fossil fuel industry from municipalities are getting blocked because our federal judiciary is blocking them.
Yeah.
You know, so it's something to look at. And people often forget about the important role of the judiciary in blocking social change, not just facilitating it, as has happened at some junctures in our history, but like obstructing it. And I think that's what I've experienced in this case.
Do you think that the people sitting in the boardroom at Chevron, how do I say this? Do you think that they lack insight into what they're doing, or do you think that they are tools of something stronger than them?
Both. I mean, look, if you're on Chevron's board, you know, if you're the kind of person who would put him or herself in a position to get asked to be on that board, you've already made your bed with the forces in our society that are about accumulation of great personal wealth. You know, in this case, the fossil fuel industry, which causes significant destruction to our planet. So, you know, I think to the people on Chevron's board who work in this world, I mean, everything is just normal. Like, oh, this is what we do. We sell oil, we make money. And anyone who threatens that, of course, we're going to attack. I mean, we're obligated to attack them. We have fiduciary duties to our shareholders. You know, it's very easy to justify this kind of awful behavior, given, you know, the securities laws in the United States and such. But I think this case and Chevron's behavior in this particular case, given locking up a lawyer, you know, thumbing their nose at indigenous peoples of Ecuador who won the case, I think it's really extreme. I don't think you see this kind of extreme injustice, you know, facilitated by judges in other cases. I've never seen it. And so I'm shocked by it. I mean, I'm experiencing it, but it's just stunning.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Union Carbide Bhopal disaster, you know, very similar.
Because, you know, that was one of the greatest industrial accidents in world history. And thousands of people died, and the average victim maybe got $2,000-$3,000 in compensation because this court in New York, the same court that is locking me up, has refused to let the victims of Bhopal, of Dow Chemical in Bhopal, Dow Chemical, an American company, come use U.S. courts to get justice as a way to limit the liability. You know, so the Bhopal case is another really good example of the hostility I think some U.S. judges feel toward foreign victims of human rights violations committed by American companies abroad, which is a critical issue.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Yes Men?
Yes.
Yeah, they came to my attention when one of them went on BBC News World and pretended to be a representative of DuPont, I think, which had just bought Union Carbide.
I remember
and
that.
Said, you remember that?
Yeah,
Well, they've become friends of mine. I'm going to call them after we finish this and see if they can put together something on your behalf.
I just want to say, I don't know if we've talked about this because we've covered a lot of ground here, but one of the most bizarre, disturbing features of my situation is I'm being prosecuted for criminal contempt, not by the government, but by a private Chevron law firm. This is a corporate prosecution. And I don't think this country's ever seen this. I mean, how is it? Judge Kaplan, who's had it out for me, charged me with criminal contempt because I wouldn't turn over my computer and cell phone to Chevron, and I appealed it instead. That, to me, is not a criminal act. That's normal litigation. But Judge Kaplan was after me. He takes these charges to the U.S. Attorney's Office, who refuses to prosecute me. I think they correctly saw this was baseless. And then Judge Kaplan says, well, I'm not going to rest there. And he appoints a private prosecutor from a Chevron law firm who's prosecuting me and being paid by taxpayers, $300 an hour. She's billed $464,000 so far that we've paid to prosecute me for a misdemeanor that never should have been brought. That's the state of play right now with me in New York.
Yeah, I would have thought that if the Justice Department decided not to bring charges, then that was it. I didn't even know it was possible for a judge to hire a private firm to pursue a contempt case.
Well, it's very rare. It happens under extremely narrow circumstances when a judge just charges a lawyer in his or her court with misbehaving. And then they're obligated to take their charge to the U.S. attorney. And if the U.S. attorney turns it down, there's a rule where they can appoint a private lawyer. It happens once every 5 years nationwide. Hardly ever happens because, the U.S. attorney usually takes the case.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is he could have appointed Kaplan, any of 1,000 neutral former federal prosecutors who live in Manhattan. And he appointed the one person, her name, by the way, is Rita Glavin, who works for a Chevron law firm. What the hell is that all about? And worse, he never told us. It was never disclosed. He appointed her. She starts asking for my detention at home and got it. I've been at home almost 2 years now with an ankle bracelet on a misdemeanor with the maximum sentence of 180 days. No professional prosecutor would have locked me up for 1 day because there is not any other person in America charged with a misdemeanor locked up pretrial other than Stephen Donziger, the lawyer who won the judgment against Chevron. Come on.
It doesn't, I mean, it seems like they're, not only are they not trying to hide what they're up to, they're trying to advertise what they're up to.
That's something that I think about a lot. Charles Blow in the Times, New York Times, had a really good column the other day about, just talking about the George Floyd case, how when that officer, Chauvin, was on his neck, it was such overkill. It was almost like he was trying to advertise, I can do this and you can't stop me.
Yeah.
And I think there's a similar dynamic to me. I think they are almost relishing people watching me get crushed through their naked corruption. I mean, they almost want they want people to know they can do this. I mean, usually exposing corruption has a tendency to stop the corruption. In this case, I think what's happening is the more we expose it, the angrier they get. We're challenging it. They're like, we're just going to jam him. We're just going to jam him. And that's what they're trying to do. But, I need help, by the way. And I don't know if I can segue into that, but I mean, we've built a pretty damn big movement over the last year. Supporters, including 55 Nobel laureates who've demanded my release. Thousands of lawyers around the world have signed a statement on my behalf. And I've got a lot of followers on Twitter. You can follow me at @SDonziger if you can. I was on Twitter Live the other night for the very first time, and 25,000 people or so have listened to what I had to say about the case, which blows my mind. People are really engaged because I think they see this for what it is, which is it's not just about me, even though that's compelling and I need help and I want to get my life back, as does my son and wife, but it's not just about me. Like, people look at this and realize this is a corporate playbook that Chevron and Judge Kaplan are using to test it out and see if they can get away with it. Right. And, we can't let them get away with it. I mean, I've already suffered so much, and I'll acknowledge there are other people in the American criminal justice system who are innocent, suffering far worse than me. But what's never happened that you see in this case is a corporate accountability lawyer who won a case being locked up as a form of retaliation in a corporate prosecution controlled by Chevron, or at least orchestrated by Chevron. I mean, that is unbelievable. And if that gets upheld, that's just not going to be good for the nature of our society or our free speech or, our democracy.
How do you maintain your sort of fundamental faith in the legal system in the face of what you've been dealing with? I mean, I look at you like like an athlete who's leaving everything out there on the basketball court, and then you find out, like, wait a minute, the refs have been paid off. It doesn't matter how many points we score, we're going to lose. Like, how do you keep playing the game?
Wow, that question hits me, man. I mean, I got to tell you, that's a tough question to hear, because I think that's what's happened. And then you sort of feel like you were played for a fool, right? You're a lawyer. Hey, I'll bring a lawsuit. Oh, let's present evidence. Oh, we won. Oh, you're still not going to pay? Because they're going to, undermine the entire process through paid witness testimony. I mean, that is what's happened here. Now, how do I maintain my faith? I think I have a very realistic view of the U.S. justice system right now. And there's good parts, there's bad parts. I recognize that what I'm dealing with is totally unfair and stacked against me. I have no choice but continue to engage, speak the truth, expose what I believe is wrongdoing in the system, and seek justice for my clients in Ecuador and my own personal freedom. And I just have no choice but to continue that fight, because once that ends, what do we really have? I mean, thousands of people now know about this, and they don't like that. So the process of fighting, even if it's the odds, even if it's structurally kind of stacked against you, can often expose it in a way that ultimately you can win. And, I have a very broad view of things that have happened in history. I mean, how many advances in the cause of social justice in countries throughout history happen when it all looks dead and lost, and suddenly it just blows up, Yeah. So the night is always darkest in the hour before the dawn. I have hope, and I think we're going to get there.
Is your mom alive?
No, she died in 2009. My mom, her name was Honey. She was a great lady. I was a kid, and I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and she would take me and my sister to pickets in front of the grocery stores because of the Farm Workers Union and Cesar Chavez. I mean, she cultivated in us a real sense that we had a broader duty to care about others and to care about our society. And, that's sort of where my value system was born in my home, due to my mom's awesome leadership of our family. And so unfortunately, I lost my mom in 2009. She died on December 7th, 2009. And literally 2 days later, Chevron started its first lawsuit against me. And, I was really happy she didn't have to live to see that shit, to be honest.
Yeah.
That
would have hurt her.
She would have been strong as an ox, as she always was. But, literally 2 days, I didn't even get a chance to grieve properly. And I had to deal with the shit they were throwing at me.
How do you talk to your son's 14? Is that right?
Yeah. Matthew.
How do you talk to him about this?
About my situation?
Yeah. I remember being 14 and anything that would have put my father in any kind of danger would have really freaked me out. And I imagine it's difficult to get him to see the big picture. Or maybe he does. Maybe he's a lot smarter than I was. I don't know.
That's a tough one. I mean, I'll say this, a couple of responses to that. I mean, one is he carries a lot watching his dad suffer. And also our lifestyle has been diminished. We're stuck in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we used to get out a lot, even if it's just to the corner for dinner or traveling. And I would often take Matthew with me, for work. I'd travel to Canada or to London, and, he saw a lot of the world until this happened. So I think it's a real blow to him and all of us. And what it really does, I'm talking about the indefinite house arrest that I'm under. It steals away your ability to plan for the future. You never know you can't plan. Oh, what are we going to do this summer? Can we go visit our friends in Jacksonville? Can we go visit my sister? Can we go to the beach? You can't plan. We're just here. I encourage my wife and son to get away without me, and they do. But, he's caring a lot. He's also awesome, kind. I think he gets it. He sees the media, he sees interviews like this. I think he's really proud of me, but it's tough. It's tough. My wife and I, Chris, these attacks have been going on against me for 10 years. They didn't just happen 2 years ago. I want to be clear about that. They've been attacking me for 10 years, and they have websites dedicated to destroying my reputation. Websites they've created. Amazon Crude is one. Go look at it. It's just extraordinary. Google me. They buy Google ads to trash me, whenever I start looking good because of some media article. So, my wife was like, oh my God, are you ever going to get your name back? And I'm like, the best we're ever going to do, and this was 10 years ago, is tell the truth, keep our narrative alive. Their narrative is alive too. It happens to be false, in my opinion. My narrative is very much alive. It's true. And, people are going to see two narratives and they're going to make their own judgments. And that's okay. That's okay. That's good for us. Because, we're in an arms race against Chevron, which is has 100,000 nuclear weapons, and we just have slingshots. And we are, I think, ascendant with our narrative. And, it's traumatic, but we decided never to let a trauma turn into a pathology, meaning, let's create happiness and normalcy in our home while we deal with this professionally, for our child and for us. And, even under house arrest, there's not a day that goes by that we don't experience happiness in our home. We're conscious of it. We practice it. Yeah. So, that kind of explains, I think, why I'm able to withstand this.
Stephen, one of the reasons I'm really happy you found some time to do this is I hope that Joe Rogan sees this, and everybody watching this, tweet at Joe, send Joe emails, whatever, create a firestorm, because, I have my audience that I love, maybe 50,000 people, but I would love for you and Joe to spend some time talking and reach millions of people. And, I know that he cares about things like this, and he's a mensch. So,
that would be great. And before we go, do you mind if I mention our website? People won't.
No, I wanted to ask you, how can people help you? Is there a defense fund that people can contribute to?
Yeah. Go to if you want to help, go to a website. It's called DONZIGERDefense.com, DONZIGER, defense.com, all one word. And you can sign up for our campaign, meaning you'll get our emails. And sometimes we'll say, hey, take action, write this congressperson, that kind of stuff. And you can also donate to the Legal Defense Fund. It takes significant resources to deal with a monster like Chevron. That money doesn't go to me. It goes to a trust fund at a law firm in Seattle. And it pays legal expenses and pays some of our household expenses because I've been unable to work for 2 years since they locked me up. So luckily, a lot of people have helped. Most donations are, tons of small donations, which we love, $5, $10, $20. Some people give 100, 500, 1,000, whatever you can give. If you can give, please go to DONZIGERDefense.com and help. But at a minimum, even if you can't give, because I know times are tough for many people, go to the website anyway and sign up, give us your email, and sign up for the campaign.
Beautiful. Hey, man, thank you so much. The first thing I ever really cared about as a kid was Native American cultures. When I was 11, 12 years old, I read a book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee that really touched me. And then for the next 5 years, all I cared about was Native Americans and the history, which, of course, alienated me from contemporary American society because I realized like I was on the wrong side, and I remember reading over and over again about how the government would sign a treaty with a tribe, and then, like the treaty that gave the Lakota the Black Hills, and then someone found gold, and then the treaty didn't matter anymore. And the Indians just got murdered and pushed and pushed and pushed. And there were no lawyers apparently in those days who could represent the Indians. There were no lawyers from Harvard who were saying, fuck it, I know I could make a lot of money, but I'm going to go represent these people because they deserve it. And I see what you're doing as part of the same tradition. It's the same process that's playing out.
Well, I'm honored and flattered that you said that, and also distressed, because another parallel is, broken treaties, broken court promises.
Right.
Can you imagine the indigenous leaders of Ecuador? They could have protested. They could have, frankly, probably with some moral justification, attacked the oil workers physically. They played by the rules. They went to court, as did I, and they won. And Chevron refuses to pay and is now working with another court to undermine the Ecuadorian court. It's the same thing. It's broken treaties, broken promises for indigenous peoples up here in North America, Native Americans, and also in Latin America with the Ecuadorians. And I think it's apt that you brought that up.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I really am honored that you found some time for this. And I hope everyone will go to DONZIGERDefense.com and throw some money in the can and do whatever we each can individually to throw a little weight behind this. You're working for all of us, not just for the Ecuadorians.
Chris, I just want to thank you. Your questions were just incredibly thoughtful. And thanks for just the way you approach these important issues, man. You're an important person in our culture, and I'm honored to be on your podcast.
Thanks, brother.